This is certainly possible and could well be done in the domain of some established universal working, but it lacks the necessary evolutionary endurance. If Savitri's birth is in the context of evolutionary birth, evolutionary progress, then it has to be in the context of evolutionary endurance. It lacks durability, the need is permanent. If such a birth can appear due to the occurrence, it can then easily go away due to the occurrence. In that sense, sex act has given a kind of solidity to the creation and enduring permanence to the creation. There is no doubt that the modus operandi for perpetuation adopted by nature has a definite credible merit. Something wonderful, something remarkable, something very amazing that she has worked out. The occult precipitation of the higher or subtler is not a part of evolutionary growth yet. Although it may help evolutionary growth, it is not yet a part of evolutionary growth at the moment. And therefore, it is through the evolutionary process that the boon must materialize. The divine goddess cannot but pass through the portals of the birth, that is a death. But there remains the most uncomfortable feeling. A yogi engaged in a sex act that is not conventional, that is not what tradition prescribes, that is not what has been taught. There is no example of the sort in the long spiritual history. In fact, that is rather shocking, not only to our moral sense, but also at times to the spiritual sense. Not that the rishis have not fallen to sex impulses, not that they did not cohabit with their wives, not that they did not have children, some of them becoming famous rishis. Holy and pious people have given themselves to outbursts of passion, yet abstention from sex. Continence, brahmacharya is a valid rule which is not without foundation. That is the dilemma. Here is what the mother says. She says very categorically, one must abstain from all pleasure seeking, including sexual pleasure. For every sexual act is a step towards death. She says every sexual act is a step towards death. That is why, from the most ancient time, in the most sacred and sacred school, this act was prohibited to every aspirant towards immortality. The sexual act is always followed by longer or shorter period of unconsciousness that open the door to all kinds of influences and causes a fall in consciousness. But if one wants to prepare oneself for the supramental life, one must never allow one's consciousness to slip into laxity and inconscience under the pretext of pleasure or even of rest and relaxation. One should find relaxation in force and light, not in darkness and weakness. Continence is therefore the rule of all those who aspire for progress, but especially for those who want to prepare themselves for the supramental manifestation. This continence must be replaced by total abstinence, achieved not by coercion and suppression, but by a kind of inner alchemy, as a result of which the energies that are normally used in the act of procreation are transmuted into energies of progress and integral transformation. It is obvious that for the result to be total and truly beneficial, all sexual impulses and desire must be eliminated from the mental and vital consciousness as well as from the physical will. It is necessary. All radical and durable transformation proceeds from within outward, so that the external transformation is a normal, almost inevitable result of this. But that is a different thing, quite a different thing. Here, Ashwapati, the yogi, who had the most transcendental realization, has to now consciously and deliberately resort to sex act. Ashwapati has to father the divine goddess mortal birth. Ashwapati has to father the divine goddess's mortal birth. He is a yogi par excellence. There is no doubt about it. And is nevermore subject to the laws and influences of nature. But that cannot preclude him from adopting the mechanisms of nature. That cannot preclude him from adopting the mechanism of nature, her tools and methods, the process of procreation and perpetuation, her art and craft and technique. Nothing can preclude him in adopting her art and craft and technique, which in her present mode of materiality. In fact, there is no other way for the birth without sex. And Vashapati has to resort to it, be a yogi or anyone else. Ashwapati has to accept it. Ashwapati has to get back into the business of created things. Ashwapati had asked for her birth. Ashwapati must be ready to bring it about. Ashwapati does it not in the smallness or pettiness of man. Ashwapati does it not in the smallness or pettiness of man, but in the greatness of a yogi. Only one who is above sex, totally above sex, can triumphantly use sex as a means, as an instrument, as a mechanism for getting the wanted thing done. One may fool oneself in the process, but that cannot deny the reality of it. Ashwapati has to become a father. Ashwapati has to become a father. He has become a father, become consciously. It looks that is a more difficult, a more challenging job he had done than approaching the goddess and getting a boon. In it, a flame child is born, one who will be the supreme soul and liar. Indeed, that uncomfortable feeling, that uneasy feeling of ours who are not yogis, is that of is it that of any worth at all? Is it that of any consequence at all? Our uncomfortable feeling, our uneasy feeling, is it of any consequence at all? Does it need any respect? Has it to be respected? Does it deserve any consideration? Are we the ones who are going to pass judgment on the acts of yogis, although there are any number of Peter Heses in the world who will do it for a coin? What is our qualification to do that? To pass verdicts on the masters of art and science and spirituality and occultism, who have under their command forces natural and supernatural. Our qualification simply is big ignorance, a bigger ignorance represented by the ilk of Peter Heses. For one who is given to spiritual life, sex act is a retrograde step. That is the general rule. This is particularly so when there is the tendency to yield to sex act, to passion, to gratify such hunger, to fulfill such desire, to high unbridled proclivity for it. These come in the way of developing finer and subtler perceptions and intuitions entering into our faculties, they clouding our consciousness, they pushing back our life by years. What is not acceptable, in fact, what is certainly deleterious, is sex indulgence. Yes, sex indulgence that has to be avoided, that has to be shunned, that has to be kept aside. And for it, sexual abstinence is not the cure. The cure is sex purification and sex transcendence. that should also mean that the sex act has to be a purposeful, spirit-driven function. There has to be a kind of purity in it, the purity of the flame that burns with golden intensity. It should be free of all turbidity, should not be governed by the vital, by lust and possessiveness, by passion and craving and emotion. Yes, passion and craving and emotion cannot govern it. It has to be without deceitfulness. It has to be without deceiving oneself. It has to be without deceiving, which is not that difficult also to spot. It should be of the nature of tranquil full moon in the cloudless autumn night. It is a purity which is even beyond the possession of the God. Possibly, most certainly, we could expect this kind of purity from a yogi like Ashwapati. Yes, he is in full possession of such a purity. He is not subject to sex. He is not at all subject to sex. He is above sex. But that aboveness does not mean he can't use sex for a particular purpose. Being above sex does not mean that sex cannot be used by him. He is above created things, and that does not mean that he can't or won't exploit created things. It has a specific result to obtain. He remains untamed by actions of his, because these actions take place with a yogic fire, with a yogic consciousness, with a yogic understanding, with a yogic fire, yogagni, ever burning the fire of the spirit, fire that purifies. The chant always is, O fire, thou art the seer and the ordainer. The priest, the call, the purifier of wisdom must be given sacrifice, rapturous, strong for sacrifice, one to be prayed in the pilgrim rite with illumined thought. O brilliant flame, O fire, thou art the seer and the ordainer. Actually, it is the birth of this child, the divine God child, claiming the divine sponsored will. It is that which makes Ashwapati Yoga Tapasya a perfect accomplishment. The reward of high spiritual perfection. It is that birth of the child which brings completeness to his Yoga Tapasya, brings fruition to his Yoga Tapasya. Without that, his Yoga Tapasya would be kind of hanging. It brings fruition to it. Without the birth of this girl child, Ashwapati's great realization would remain desolate and barren. The birth of a divine child through a sex act itself makes that sex act absolutely super yogi, in which nature becomes a happy participant. Him desire and adore, for he is the first and chief who brings to perfect accomplishment or sacrifice. Him desire and adore, him fire, the divine Agni. Him desire and adore, for he is the first and chief who brings to perfect accomplishment our sacrifice, since he takes all offerings of the Aryan people and makes them to shine with light. He is the sun of energy, the bringer of boon, the flood of strength, the goddess whole, the flame that gives treasures.